And today we have a delegate from the United Workers Union, Shania Vargas, who's going to share with us the plight of the workers in the Philippines. And we do extend our solidarity and happy May Day greetings to all of our brothers and sisters around the world. Shania, welcome.
Maritime greetings to everyone who is watching here with us on unceded Gadigal land, celebrating a momentous day for working class peoples all over the world, reminding us of the incessant value of class solidarity and collective action. I am Shania, and I am speaking on behalf of the Progressive Union of Filipino Migrant Workers here in Australia, Bayan, and we are always in gratitude with the United Workers Union for providing communities like us the platform to speak. Much of the organizing that we do is oriented toward the collective struggle against imperialist dispossession that persists to displace our communities, encroach on our lands, and exploit our resources and populations. In saying so, as migrants and settlers of this land, we also acknowledge that the so-called organizing and activism that we do here will never be successful without First Nations justice and self-determination. Wherever we are in the world, the working class are forced to contend with the aggravating effects of the global economic crisis in some form or another. In Australia, it is appalling on how ongoing cases of job loss, precarious working conditions, and insecure wages have been the norm in the current labor market. With it come us, the toiling masses, who bear the brunt of the rising costs of living, struggling to put roofs over our heads, while the big bosses continue to profit from the recession. The effects of the crisis are even more compounded in the global south. In the Philippines, for example, hunger and poverty have become so normalized that half of the population has experienced it at least once. And for migrant Filipinos like me, it is these instances that push most of us away from our homelands, away from our families, in order to make a living. And instead of addressing how every working individual should have access to livable wages, decent jobs, our government, the Philippine government, in my situation, has been busy instead in the crackdown of activists, killing journalists, community workers, and unionists, and those who are all campaigning for better conditions are killed and illegally arrested for being so-called enemies of the state. And instead of upholding national democracy and sovereignty, our president, the Marcos administration, has welcomed U.S. imperialists in our seas, in our soils, and has been indifferent to Chinese aggression in the Philippines. We shamefully condemn the U.S. military who is on Philippine seas right now during the recent joint war games and military exercises. It is with much contempt as well to say that together with China and the US, the Australian government has continuously funded military aggression in the Philippine countryside and enabled the ongoing humanitarian country in our crisis. The Australian government also provided this so-called technical assistance to draft the Philippines anti-terrorism law, which was mentioned by the Secretary of the ETU earlier, who illegalizes democratic protests like this to legalize state impunity and fascism. And all of these things happening in Australia, in the Philippines, are not isolated cases. Much of the imperialist-sponsored militarization in Southeast Asia, such as the case of Myanmar, have seen democracy replaced by military fascism. And we must know that the working class, our communities, are at the receiving end of the deadly and destructive impacts and consequences of these wars, and can never reap any victories, for there can be no future with imperialism. So now, we call on the Australian government to stop supporting wars and military aggression in the Philippines and the Asia Pacific as a whole, and we challenge them to stand alongside the working class peoples all over the world and channel war money and efforts such as AUKUS deals to decent worker wages and social services like healthcare and education. While it is without a doubt that these crises exacerbate these inequalities, crises also generate resistance. So may we always carry the historic and militant fervor of the May Day movement as we return to organize our workplaces, our communities, for it is only through the strength and solidarity among our ranks that we can truly build power to stand up against imperialism and forward genuine social change. So happy May Day, everyone!